On the night of August 6th, 2011, at exactly 12:03 a.m., security cameras inside Finnegan's pub in Stockton, California, captured what appeared to be just another Saturday night. A young woman in a brown and white striped top stood near the restroom, laughing and chatting with friends. 23-year-old Daylene Carlson had her whole life ahead of her, a college student ready to start a new chapter. She looked happy, relaxed, safe. But then something changes. A man with a goatee and a backwards baseball cap approaches from behind. He puts his arm around her waist. In an instant, Daylene's body language shifts. She steps away quickly, almost rushing into the bathroom. The cameras capture everything. What nobody watching that footage could have expected was that this seemingly harmless interaction would become the first piece of evidence in a major criminal inquiry, and that within hours, Daylene would be gone forever. This is the story of how a series of surveillance cameras became silent witnesses to a tragic loss, and how one man's lies would unravel frame by frame. Daylene Carlson had recently moved to Stockton to attend college, staying with her Aunt Maggie and cousin Cecily. The 3 months before school started were meant for exploring, making friends, getting comfortable in her new surroundings. Daylene was the kind of young woman everyone described as having potential to do anything she wanted. Intelligent, attractive, full of life. Her cousin Cecily became her guide to the local scene, showing her around town and introducing her to their social circle. That Saturday evening, the plan was simple. The two cousins would hit Finnegan's pub together, meet up with friends, enjoy the night. But then Cecily came down with a fever. She had to stay home. Daylene made a promise to Aunt Maggie. "I'll be back by 1 a.m., she said, carefully applying her makeup, picking out her outfit. She was nervous about fitting in with new classmates, excited about the possibilities ahead. She left for the bar alone. She would never come home. The surveillance footage tells a story that Daylene's family would only see weeks later, when every frame became crucial evidence. At midnight, cameras positioned outside Finnegan's show, groups of young people hanging out near the entrance. Everything looks normal. Just another typical Saturday night in Stockton. Then the camera catches her, the striped top unmistakable. Daylene enters the bar at exactly 12:04 a.m. Inside, a second camera positioned near the bathrooms provides another angle. She's surrounded by a group of young men in the hallway. She's the only woman visible. She appears to be drinking, laughing, chatting. She looks happy. But here's where things get disturbing. At 12:07 a.m., a figure appears in the frame. The man with the goatee and backwards cap, later identified as Jason Gillie, a close friend who frequently hosted parties. He approaches Daylene from behind without warning. His arm goes around her waist in a gesture that's far too familiar, too possessive. The camera captures Daylene's reaction clearly. She doesn't lean into him. She doesn't smile. Instead, she immediately steps aside and rushes into the bathroom. Jason walks away as if nothing happened. For investigators who would later review this footage dozens of times, this moment stood out. Something about Jason's presence made Daylene uncomfortable. She needed to get away from him, even if just for a moment. If you think this was just an awkward social interaction, think again. This brief encounter would become the first red flag in a timeline that led to her disappearance. Inside that bathroom, Daylene pulled out her phone. She sent a text message to James' cousin, someone she'd been getting close to recently. The message mentioned that after leaving the bar, she planned to head to a friend's party. She wanted to keep the night going. James wasn't in town that night. He was away on a church trip. But this text message would later prove crucial to the investigation, establishing Daylene's mindset and plans. She wasn't planning to go home at 1 a.m. like she'd promised Aunt Maggie. She was young, having fun, wanting to explore her new city. How could she have known that this decision would cost her everything? At exactly 1:09 a.m., surveillance cameras capture Daylene walking outside Finnegan's. She approaches someone leaning against the wall near the entrance. The glare from bright lights makes it impossible to see his face clearly, but her body language tells a story. Her hands are animated. She appears upset, maybe angry. The conversation looks intense. Moments later, she turns and walks away. The man steps forward, and now the camera catches him. Jacob Evangelisti, her recent boyfriend. Or rather, her recent ex-boyfriend. Because according to what investigators would later learn, Daylene had just broken up with him. Right there, outside the bar, in front of everyone. Jacob looked upset too. Rejected. Hurt. And in true crime cases, a rejected boyfriend always becomes a person of interest. But the surveillance footage was about to reveal something far more sinister. At 1:13 a.m., Daylene says goodbye to friends outside Finnegan's and disappears from the camera's view. For the next several minutes, she's nowhere to be seen on any surveillance system. Where did she go? Who was she with? This is where the investigation would later hit pay dirt. Detectives, working backward from the bar, started checking every business with security cameras in the area. They compiled a list of 24-hour stores near Finnegan's. The closest one, Food for Less grocery store, just a short drive away. If Daylene wanted to buy alcohol for that party she mentioned, this would be the logical stop. Detective Brad Burrell requested the surveillance footage. He started reviewing it from 1:15 a.m. forward, knowing Daylene had left Finnegan's just minutes earlier. His eyes scanned every frame, looking for that distinctive brown and white striped top. And then, there she was. At 1:33 a.m., Daylene walks through Food for Less. But she's not alone. Walking beside her, his arm casually draped around her shoulders, is a man in a backwards baseball cap. The internal cameras capture them moving through the store together, acting like everything is normal. They're shopping, picking up items, getting ready to check out. When they exit the store at 1:41 a.m., the external cameras get a perfect shot of the man's face. The goatee, the cap. It's unmistakable, Jason Gillie, the same man who had made Daylene so uncomfortable just 90 minutes earlier at the bar. Here's what makes this surveillance footage so damning. When detectives first questioned Jason about Daylene's disappearance, he told them a very specific story. He said he'd been at Finnegan's that night. He'd offered to give Daylene a ride home, but she declined. Then, around 1 a.m., he left the bar alone and went straight home to care for his sick brother. His grandmother could verify he was home by 1:30 a.m. But the cameras don't lie. The Food for Less footage proved Jason had lied about leaving alone. He'd left with Daylene, they'd gone shopping together, they'd bought alcohol, and based on the timestamps, there was no way he could have been home when he claimed. When detectives brought Jason back in for questioning, they had the footage ready. But first, they wanted to see if he'd stick to his story. They let him sit in the interrogation room for an hour, letting the pressure build. No phone, no distractions. Just Jason and his thoughts about what the police might know.
Sorry it took so long. How's it going?
Getting tired.
What's that?
Getting tired.
Yeah.
The detective doesn't immediately show the surveillance footage. Instead, he asks Jason to walk through his timeline again.
What time did you get home?
About 1:20, 1:30.
He's still lying. Even knowing the police are investigating a missing person case, even understanding that his friend hasn't been seen in days, Jason maintains his false timeline. This is crucial because in criminal investigations, lies about whereabouts during critical hours are massive red flags. If you have nothing to hide, why lie about something so basic?
We don't expect you to know every minute of what you did.
That's not reasonable.
It's not reasonable.
Okay.
But that's the good thing with surveillance, video surveillance at different locations, the cameras. We know a lot more of what's going on.
Right.
Okay?
The color drains from Jason's face. Confronted with evidence he can't deny, Jason breaks down. Tears stream down his face as he admits he lied. Yes, he left Finnegan's with Daylene. Yes, they went to Food for Less together. They bought alcohol and went back to his place. But now his story changes again.
Jason, let's make it better.
Let's make it better right now.
Okay?
Did you guys have sex?
No.
Jason.
Jason. We had sex and we hung out for a little bit more and then she said she wanted to go home.
According to this new version, Jason drove Daylene home early Sunday morning. They had an argument in the car. When they arrived at her aunt's house, Daylene got out, walked toward the front door, and that was the last time he saw her. He drove away. End of story. The detectives aren't buying it. The interrogation intensifies.
Jason, no.
Where are we going to find the body?
Help us find her.
Help us bring her home.
Her family deserves it,
You have a family. She has a family.
She deserves it. I know that.
She does.
I did not do anything to her.
But investigators have learned something crucial about interrogations. Watch what suspects do after they leave the room. Because if Jason really dropped Daylene off safely at home around 2 or 3 a.m. on Sunday morning, what did he do next? Where did he go? This question would lead to the most chilling piece of surveillance footage yet. Detective Burrell spent hours visiting every gas station along the route between Jason's house and Daylene's aunt's home. He collected surveillance footage from each location, methodically reviewing every frame starting from 5 a.m. on August 7th, the morning after Daylene disappeared. 6 hours into the tedious review process, with his eyes burning from staring at screens, something finally appeared on the footage from a gas station at the very south edge of Stockton. At 11:03 a.m., 9.5 hours after Jason and Daylene had left Food for Less together, a silver sedan pulls into the station. It's Jason's car. He's alone. At first glance, nothing seems unusual. He's getting gas. Normal activity. But Detective Burrell leans closer to the screen, studying every detail. Jason's clothes are dirty. His shirt has visible stains. His hands look grimy. He appears disheveled, exhausted. Then comes the moment that would change everything. After pumping gas, Jason returns to his car. He sits in the driver's seat for a moment, then suddenly gets back out. He walks around to the passenger side. He checks the door, opens it, examines something. Then he slams the passenger door shut with unusual force, gets back in the car, and drives away. Why would someone check their passenger door like that? Why slam it so forcefully? Detective Burrell's mind races through the possibilities, and one scenario keeps coming back. The door wasn't closing properly because something violent had happened. Someone had been forced from that car with such haste that the door mechanism was damaged. Seeing this footage makes me believe that Jason has driven her out to one of the fields somewhere south of Stockton, Detective Burrell would later explain. Aggressively removed her from the car with such haste that the front passenger door didn't close properly. And I believe that Jason is responsible for the loss of Daylene Carlson. But believing and proving are two different things. Without physical evidence of a crime, Jason remained free. The investigation had hit a wall. August turned to September. September turned to October. Aunt Maggie kept calling Daylene's phone, hoping against hope that somehow she'd answer. The family printed flyers. They organized search parties. They pleaded with anyone who might have information to come forward. Daylene's face stared out from telephone poles and store windows across Stockton. Missing, Daylene Carlson, 23 years old, last seen August 6th outside Finnegan's pub. The community rallied. Volunteers searched parks, alleys, abandoned buildings. But Stockton is a big city, and a person can disappear into a lot of places. Jacob Evangelisti, the ex-boyfriend who'd been broken up with that night, remained under suspicion. So did James' cousin. The young man Daylene had been texting about the party. Detectives interviewed them repeatedly, checking and rechecking their alibis. Jacob had been at Finnegan's but left separately. James had been out of town on a church trip verified by multiple witnesses. The evidence kept circling back to Jason Gillie and those missing hours after 1:41 a.m. But without concrete proof, prosecutors couldn't move forward. Then, in late October, a farmer working his fields roughly 20 miles south of Stockton made a discovery that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Among the corn stalks, partially hidden by vegetation, was a tragic discovery. It didn't take long for investigators to confirm what they'd feared for months. The remains belonged to Daylene Carlson. She had sustained fatal injuries. An additional injury to the back of her head suggested a deliberate and cold-blooded act. Scattered around the scene, investigators found several spent .22 caliber shell casings. The cause of death was clear. The brutality was undeniable. But the why remained a mystery that Jason refused to explain. With Daylene's remains recovered and cause of death established, the case shifted from missing person to homicide. Now prosecutors needed to connect Jason Gillie definitively to the weapon involved. They had the shell casings. They had the surveillance footage showing Jason's suspicious behavior. They had his lies. But they needed the gun. That's when an unexpected source provided the breakthrough. A young man contacted police with information that would seal Jason's fate. He told detectives that Jason possessed an unregistered .22 caliber handgun. He knew where it might be found. He was willing to help. Police recovered the weapon and sent it to ballistics. The analysis came back definitive. The gun matched the shell casings found at the crime scene. This was the weapon that had ended Daylene Carlson's life, and it belonged to Jason Gillie. The arrest happened quickly after that. Jason was taken into custody, charged with first-degree murder. He refused to speak about what really happened that night, maintaining his silence even as the evidence mounted against him. But investigators, using the timeline established by surveillance cameras and witness statements, were able to piece together Daylene's final hours. Here's what detectives believe happened, based on all available evidence. At 1:41 a.m. on August 7th, Jason and Daylene left Food for Less together with alcohol they'd purchased. They drove to Jason's house. At some point during the early morning hours, Jason made advances. Whether Daylene consented initially or not, something went terribly wrong. The scene suggested a personal motive and a desperate struggle. Investigators theorized that Daylene threatened to report Jason to police for his unwanted contact. This threat triggered a violent rage in Jason. Rather than let her leave, rather than face the consequences of his actions, he made a horrific decision. He forced Daylene into his car. Despite her struggling, you can imagine her fear, her desperate attempts to reason with someone she'd considered a friend. Jason drove south, mile after mile, passing her aunt's house where she should have been safe, heading toward remote farmland where nobody would hear cries for help. At some point during this nightmare drive, Jason stopped the car. Maybe Daylene thought she had a chance to escape. Maybe she thought she could talk him down, reason with him, convince him to let her go. But Jason's mind was made up. He forced her out of the passenger side door with such force that it damaged the door mechanism. She likely fell to the ground in the dirt between cornrows, vulnerable, terrified, begging for her life. Jason retrieved his .22 caliber handgun. He inflicted fatal wounds upon her. As she lay there, he delivered a final injury. A deliberate act with no mercy, no hesitation. Then he left her there in a field where she wouldn't be found for 2 months. He drove to the nearest gas station to clean up, buying himself time to figure out his next move. The surveillance cameras captured him checking that damaged passenger door, slamming it shut in frustration that even his car bore evidence of what he'd done. By the time he finally went home and lied to his grandmother about what time he'd arrived, Daylene had lost her life hours earlier. The trial in 2012 revealed the full scope of Jason's deception. His defense attorneys tried various strategies, claiming the encounter was consensual, suggesting Daylene had willingly gone with him, attempting to paint her choices that night as reckless. But the prosecution had something defense couldn't overcome: a complete timeline established by surveillance cameras that caught every lie Jason told. The footage from Finnegan's showed Daylene's discomfort around Jason. The Food for Less cameras proved they left together when he claimed to be home. The gas station footage captured his suspicious behavior and disheveled appearance hours after she disappeared. His own words in interrogation, changing his story multiple times when confronted with evidence, demonstrated consciousness of guilt. And most damning of all, the ballistics match between the gun police recovered and the shell casings found next to Daylene. There was no explaining that away. The jury deliberated for less than a full day, guilty of first-degree murder. At sentencing, Daylene's family finally got to speak. Aunt Maggie, who'd spent that entire night calling and calling Daylene's phone, hoping for an answer that would never come, addressed the court. Cecily, the cousin who'd been too sick to go out that night and who carried survivor's guilt for not being there to protect Daylene, shared her pain. Daylene didn't deserve anything that happened to her, one family member stated simply. Not one bit of it. Jason Gillie was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He'll spend the rest of his days behind bars, which is exactly where he belongs. But that sentence, as just as it is, doesn't bring Daylene back. It doesn't give her the chance to finish college, build a career, fall in love, have a family. All those possibilities ended in a cornfield south of Stockton. This case demonstrates something crucial about modern criminal investigations. Surveillance cameras have become silent witnesses that never forget, never lie, and never change their stories. Jason Gillie thought he could control the narrative by lying to police, by changing his story when confronted, by staying silent about the details. But he couldn't account for every camera. The one at Finnegan's that caught Daylene's discomfort around him. The ones at Food for Less that proved they left together. The gas station cameras that captured his guilty behavior. Each piece of footage was like a puzzle piece. And when investigators put them all together, they formed a complete picture of guilt. Detective Brad Burrell, reflecting on the case, noted that Daylene was your all-American girl, young, attractive, intelligent, with a very bright future ahead of her. Her disappearance was highly unusual. Something really struck a chord with me, and it seemed that this was not right. That instinct, combined with methodical police work and modern surveillance technology, brought a perpetrator to justice. But it also raises important questions about safety that Daylene's case forces us to confront. The comments and concerns from those who learn about Daylene's case often focus on what she could have done differently. Should she have gone out alone? Should she have been more careful about drinking? Should she have avoided someone who made her uncomfortable? But here's the truth that's hard to accept. Daylene was a 23-year-old woman doing what millions of young people do every weekend. She went to a bar, she socialized with friends, she made plans to continue her night. These aren't crimes. These aren't invitations to harm. The responsibility for what happened lies entirely with Jason Gillie, who made a conscious choice to take the life of another human being rather than accept consequences for his actions. Daylene trusted someone she considered a friend. That trust was betrayed in the most brutal way possible. That said, the case does highlight safety practices that might have changed the outcome. When Daylene texted James about going to a party, she didn't specify whose party or where. When she left, Finnegan's friends saw her go but didn't know she was leaving with Jason. Aunt Maggie knew Daylene hadn't come home, but hours passed before real alarm bells rang. Modern safety experts recommend specific practices. Share your location with trusted friends through phone apps. Send photos of who you're with, including license plates if you're getting in someone's car. Check in regularly with specific details about where you are. Make sure multiple people know your plans. Would these practices have saved Daylene? Possibly. If Jason had known that people could track Daylene's location, that her friends knew exactly who she was with, he might have thought twice. Predators rely on opportunity and anonymity. Take those away, and you reduce risk. But victim blaming serves no one. Daylene's case isn't a cautionary tale about drinking or going out or trusting friends. It's a reminder that danger can come from familiar faces, and that justice, while important, can never undo the harm that's been done. Aunt Maggie, in interviews after the trial, spoke about the healing process. "It's not that you get over anything," she said, "but what really helps in the healing is remembering the good times, remembering everything that was good when she was alive." Daylene was more than a true crime case. She was someone's niece, someone's cousin, someone's friend. She had dreams and plans and potential. She lit up rooms with her smile. She was excited about starting college, about making new friends, about building a future in Stockton. Jason Gillie took all of that away in a field south of town on an August night in 2011. The surveillance cameras caught him in his lies, the ballistics evidence tied him to the weapon, and justice was ultimately served. But justice is cold comfort to a family with an empty chair at every holiday dinner, an absent voice at family gatherings, a life cut short before it truly began. Today, Jason sits in a California prison cell, his life effectively over at the age he was when he committed this act. Daylene rests in peace. Her suffering ended, but her memory preserved by those who loved her. The cameras that captured her last night alive became the instruments of justice, speaking for a victim who could no longer speak for herself. In that cornfield where her life was taken, Daylene Carlson's final moments might have remained a mystery forever. Instead, technology and determined detective work ensured that responsible parties would be caught, tried, and convicted. It's not the ending anyone wanted, but it's the justice Daylene deserved. And somewhere in California, those surveillance cameras continue recording silent witnesses waiting to tell the truth when called upon. Because in the end, cameras don't forget. They don't change their stories. They don't lie. They just show us exactly what happened frame by frame, timestamp by timestamp, until the whole truth comes into focus.